Greetings, people of Earth. My name is Jax. Welcome back, and today we are tackling Chapter 7 of the Tao Te Ching, Self through Selflessness. So, we've kind of started a really good introduction into Taoism, some of the themes and characteristics that we see. As I've said before, there are a lot of themes and reoccurring ideas that pop up again and again and again. And today, this chapter or this verse deals with the idea of sort of that whole idea of like, in order to go forward, you must first go back. This kind of multipolar or bipolar kind of attitude towards life, and how in many ways the exact opposite of what we think is correct is actually another completely valid way. Taoism isn't trying to tell you like what is correct and what is not. It's trying to get you to understand that everything just is. Everything just is, you exist, the universe exists, one day you won't exist, and theoretically one day even the universe won't exist. So the idea that these opposites are actually very closely connected is a recurring theme that we see again and again and again. That being said, I'm going to read the verse and then we're going to get into it. Self through selflessness. Heaven is long-lasting and the earth is endearing. Thus, as it is in itself long-lasting and endearing, but does not exist for its own benefit, the cosmos may endure. In the same way, the enlightened man may place himself last, but come first, and may neglect himself, yet be preserved. It is his lack of self-interest that allows him to fulfill his self. So again, not a very long verse, a lot of themes, a lot of things to unpack. So first of all, heaven is long-lasting and earth is enduring. So like I've said many times before, we are just simply travelers, visitors. The earth and the universe itself will exist long after we are gone, and it has existed long before we even became a possibility, before life on this planet even emerged. There was a lot of history and a lot of things had to come together in an exactly specific way in order for us to appear, in order for someone to paint the picture behind me, in order for anything to come to fruition. There has been a huge amount of fate and chance and basically just the Tao working its way, and it will continue to do so long after we are gone. And then it goes on to say that as it is long-lasting and enduring, it doesn't exist for its own benefit. So the idea that the universe has some kind of moral compass, or a lot of people use religion as a way of justifying their existence, and they say, well, my god or my gods created the world and they're good, and humans are created in God's image, and so because of that, the world must be good and we are good, and that's why life is worth living, is because we are created in a positive manner. Sorry if you don't believe, if you believe this, but Taoism doesn't believe that. In the Taoist idea, the universe just is, and you have been created of the universe, and you will return to the universe one day. This idea of return is a theme you're going to see in Taoism a lot, this idea of, returning to nothing, disappearing again. That's really common, and the idea of it is kind of comforting because in some ways it's existential dread and oh my gosh, what am I going to do? But in other ways it's kind of nice to know that one day we all return to that great beyond, or wherever we are, and we cease to exist. Maybe we don't cease to exist in a specific way, but our physical bodies cease to exist, and who knows where that energy is transferred, where we go, and so that's the idea of sort of returning. But because the universe doesn't exist for its own benefit, there's no right or wrong. There's no moral equivalency. Many people try and use religion to give themselves like a moral guideline, and you can do that with Taoism, but it's important to understand that there is no explicit right way or wrong way. The Tao can be practiced in a million different ways. Some people will watch these videos and think that I have absolutely no idea what the Tao is and that they have the true Tao. And the true answer is that we both have the Tao and neither of us have the Tao. Neither of us are following the correct path because there's no such thing as the correct path. Subjective experience is gonna lead to a million different interpretations, and the Tao and Taoism is just trying to say that there is no correct way, there is just the way. It's the way everything unfolds. And so I find that very comforting because I think a lot of people, like I said, use the religion thing to just justify their point of view and say, well, because of this, I think I'm right and I have the right to occupy this land, or I have the right to, go over here and take this from you. Taoism isn't really trying to say that. Taoism is just kind of saying, yo, the universe exists. One day you're going to be part of it again, and you're still part of it now. So, there you go. It doesn't have an agenda, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so in the same way, the enlightened man may place himself last and come first. I like to think of this as you are your own worst enemy, and often one meets his destiny on the road to change it. So I often think of that kind of concept. It's very popular in Taoism, the idea that, if you're gonna try and change fate, you might end up exactly in the place you didn't want to go. So if you didn't want to end up super, greedy or something, you might end up really greedy on the way to try and avoid being greedy. And these kinds of concepts are really popular in Taoism. Like I said, it's this bipolarity of one thing is actually connected to the other really closely, and we like to think of them as opposites, but it's actually all a cycle. And so you might be really far on this spectrum, on this side, and you're like, oh, I hate what's over here. But what you don't realize is that actually it's a circle, and you're right here, and your opposite belief is right here, very close to it. And by placing yourself last and not focusing so much on self-worth, your needs, and just existing, you actually end up living a much better life. And this also goes back to the idea in Taoism where you're taking things away. You're not adding rituals or practices to your life. You are trying to become a fool. You're trying to become empty. And emptiness is sort of the route at which you can attain a lot more enlightenment. You're a lot less stressed about the world. You live a happier life. And it's not necessarily advocating for ignorance is bliss, but it is advocating for simplification and just interpreting the world as it comes, not necessarily fixation on the past or the future, just existing in the present and really enjoying that. Okay, so you place yourself last and you come first, and may neglect yourself and yet be preserved. This is another good idea of the people that are really obsessed with their image tend to ruin their image. You look at many of the celebrities who are hyper focused on what they look like, what they say, how they speak, every little picture, and they get into huge controversies. They get into huge arguments and celebrity feuds, and politicians who are fixated on their power end up losing it. And so what it's talking about is when you fixate on something, when you become obsessed with something like your self-image, you become really selfish, and it does consume you. And again, we talked about this a few chapters ago, but this idea that corruption comes from within and it comes from the best intentions. You might have the absolute best intentions to be the most heroic, beautiful, selfless hero of the world. And people aren't going to see you that way. If you are absolutely obsessed with the superficial image of that, people are going to see through that. And your own actions will lead to your downfall. There's a Chinese proverb that says, never interfere with your enemy when they're making a fatal mistake. And that is such a good philosophy to live by, because Oftentimes, it is not our greatest enemy that takes us down. It is absolutely ourselves. You can look at any amount of history to understand that the idea of an own goal, like you score a goal on yourself, that has been happening since history has been recorded and probably long before that. Humans and animals and anything that is at all conscious or sentient in the universe often becomes its own worst enemy. We have anxiety, we have fear, we let that fear make our decisions, and suddenly we've made a horrible mistake that if we just stayed home that night, it would not have happened. Or if we'd gotten out of our own way, or if we'd had a little bit of humility, or if we just emptied our mind, you wouldn't have that issue. So that's kind of what it's advocating there. And then we finally get to the idea of selflessness. It is his lack of self-interest that allows him to fulfill his self. I think of this as, what is your motive? You know, I for my job, I consume quite a bit of social media. And a lot of the time, I am watching somebody's social media account, or I'm watching a video they post, and I ask myself, what's the motive? You know, are they trying to be endearing? Are they just trying to share an interesting anecdote or some advice? Do they see themselves as, you know, a future statesman or a celebrity influencer? What is exactly the motive? You know, are they being paid? Is this a paid advertisement? And I often come to the conclusion that a lot of the content that we see on social media is pretty hollow. And I am just as guilty as anyone else. But I try and be conscious now and then, if I can, with what is my intention here? What exactly am I trying to say? And sometimes I'll make a video and, you know, it just doesn't pass my smell test, and I have to delete it or remake it because it's just not working. And I don't like what it says about me. And I do some careful reflection, and at the end of the day, then I see if I can make content that hits different. I hope that makes sense, but it is his lack of self-interest that allows him to fulfill his self. And at the end of the day, having a motive, having a goal is okay. Having a motive or an ideology behind you tends to leave you in a place where you're going to be wrong. So I initially grew up in a very conservative household. And I thought, you know, I think that's probably the correct way to view things, you know, tradition over modernity, over sort of all of this innovation and social upheaval. You know, I just thought, you know, I think I'm going to be a lifelong conservative. And then as I got older, into my, you know, 15, 16 years old, I started to see the left wing of things, you know, the liberal ideology, the ideas of new breaks with tradition, those kinds of things. I'm trying to talk about this generally. I don't want to get into specifics. But as a teenager, I was pretty liberal. I was pretty like left wing of like, you know what? Like, yeah, progression, you know, we need to change things. And then it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I sort of began to see myself in the center of things. And so I was sort of like, oh my gosh, these right-wing people and these left-wing people, they're ridiculous. They're crazy. Both are wrong. If they both could just knock their heads together and understand that all the solutions are in the middle. However, now I'm old enough to understand that every fixed ideology is wrong. Every single one. If you create a fixed ideology, if you create a fixed set of principles, like I'm a centrist, no, I'm a conservative, no, I'm a leftist. If you create that persona around you, you're going to be wrong on some topics. You're going to be critically wrong, incredibly wrong in certain areas. And that's just the way it is. Even the centrists have stuff wrong. You know, you can argue that they have stuff more wrong than either side of the extremes, but I just think they're all equally wrong. And when I say that, what I mean is fixing yourself to a position leaves you open to basically screwing up and blinding yourself to specific issues or nuances, details that might not have been seen, because the universe is limitless. There are an unlimited amount of possibilities. And so when you try and apply a rigid framework to anything, a rigid religion belief system, a rigid political belief system, a rigid economical belief system, the universe is infinite. And so no system is going to tackle every issue perfectly. And so the idea of having a worldview or an ideology to help you go through life is not correct. And so what the Tao does is say, you need to be flexible. You need to understand the universe is infinite. There are infinite amounts of possibilities and circumstances that you might find yourself in. So good luck. And so it's just basically the viewpoint of a Taoist is everything is infinite. Everything is ever changing. We are not here forever. We need to enjoy and explore while we are here without the need for anxiety or fears about the future, regrets about the past. None of it really matters. And some people find this really relieving, others existential dread, like I said. So the idea of self through selflessness, to bring this all back to the conclusion, is you cannot have a fixed image, or you cannot plant your flag in the ground and say, here I will stand, here I will die, because you're gonna go. And, you will have made mistakes. You will have not been perfect. Nobody is perfect. There is no idea of perfection in Taoism. Even the Tao master makes mistakes, loses himself in ideology, follows things a little too closely, interprets things incorrectly, mishears, misreads, misinterprets. So nobody is perfect, but it's okay, because the universe will continue to go along just fine without us. And I find this very comforting. When I think of my self-image, I used to think my image was really important, the image I portrayed and also the image I saw of myself in the mirror. And I don't so much now. I try and live my life to the best of my abilities. I go with the flow. I don't let little things interrupt my enjoyment of a quiet day. It used to be like I stubbed my toe in the morning and I was late to work, and somebody took my parking place, and it's just, oh, this is such a crappy day. But now I'm much easier to flow with it. Do I have bad days? Absolutely. But I do try and just flow, just exist, just in the moment, in the present. And I don't have this calculated self-image of myself, and I'm not trying to exploit or manipulate who I truly am. If I want to go somewhere, I'm going to go there. If I'm going to have something for lunch, I'm going to have what I want. It's not going to be this calculated, manipulated set of characteristics. There's definitely a time for a bit of calculation and a bit of manipulation, but it should not be your be-all, end-all focus, and you should live a little, breathe a little, mess up a little. We're always talking about how our mistakes should be important and celebrated, but very few people actually take the time to do that. Thank you guys for listening. This was a little bit of a jumbled one. At least that's what I kind of think, but that's the way the universe works. I'm not going to fight it, because I'm not going to win that fight. So thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think about your self-image, being selfless. Do you think reputation matters? Do you think self-worth and how you view yourself is an ever-changing thing? Yeah, those are the questions that I'm curious about. So thank you for watching, and as always, I will talk to you guys tomorrow.